Yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody. I hope you enjoyed the last keynote. So here today we have Hiroki Takeuchi, who is the co-founder of GoCardless, which is an online payments company. He was the vice president of Oxford Entrepreneurs 5 or 6 years ago, I think now.
Yeah, a long time now.
Maybe.
Feels shorter than that, but yeah.
So we're pleased to have an Oxford alum back in the building. And GoCardless was a pivoted company from a previous company called Group A, which I was lucky enough to intern in a few years ago. Since founding GoCardless, they've scaled from 3 co-founders to about 20 full-time employees and went on Y Combinator, raised money from VC, so been very successful. So over to Rick.
Cool. All right, thanks for coming, everyone. It's more people than I anticipated, so I might be a bit nervous. But basically what I thought I'd talk about today was, presumably most of you guys are students, you're not actually running businesses. So I wanted to talk about what I think are the things that I wish I'd known before I started, and specifically, before you even thinking about starting a business, if that's something that you're thinking about doing in the future, what can you do now that would be really valuable to help you out when you actually do start? Then when you're actually first starting, just before you get started, what are the important things to bear in mind? And then finally, when you first start out and you're actually getting going, what are some of the things that you should avoid, or what are the things that are important to bear in mind? So before I get onto that, though, I'll just give you a quick intro. I mean, Owen did a pretty damn good job there, probably better than I'll do. But as Owen said, I used to be at Oxford, used to be VP of Oxford Entrepreneurs. So this is kind of where I learned my trade in a way. And then after that, I worked at McKinsey for a couple of years as a management consultant for my sins, and then started GoCardless. In terms of GoCardless, we started 2 years ago. 3 of us that started it, Tom, Matt, and myself. We're now, basically what we do is we make it really, really easy for small businesses to accept recurring payments via direct debit online. And so we've been going for about 2 years. We're now at 20 people. We've raised funding from a range of investors, including Y Combinator, Accel, which is a big VC, a seed fund called Passion Capital in the UK. And things are going well. They're looking up. So what can you be doing, now as students? You've got more time than anyone else, except for when you've got finals. And you could, this is when you've got the biggest opportunity to develop yourself as a founder in a way, right? There's things that you can do now which will really, really help. Somewhere down the line, if ever you do want to start a business. And the first thing that I think that is super important to bear in mind is that you need, it's about finding who you want to start a business with. This is something that happens all of the time, where people will talk to me and say, oh yeah, I'm looking for a co-founder for my business. I can't code and I need a tech guy. And it's well, these guys, Tom and Matt, who are my 2 co-founders, I see them more than my girlfriend. I see them more than anyone else. I'm basically married to both of these guys, and I love them. And we wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for those guys. And so there's a few reasons why you need to think about this, right? One is that it's super important to have co-founders. I mean, as an example, Y Combinator almost didn't invest in Dropbox, which is by far and away their most successful investment, because Drew Houston didn't have a co-founder when he first applied. And the reason why that is because when you're starting a business, it's a real roller coaster. You'll go through highs and lows, and you really need other people there with you along the way, because even though now we're 20 guys all working together, there's a relationship that you have with your co-founders that you can't ever have with an employee. Someone that you can lean against when you're feeling low, someone that you're accountable to when you just want to sack it in and be oh, forget about it. You need that someone to share the experience with, really. So it's super important to find co-founders, and what you can be doing now is building that network of people that are like-minded. Things like Oxford Entrepreneurs are a great place to find those people. and really meeting the people that you think that in like 3-4 years time you could see yourself starting a business with. Then the second thing, which I think that you can do now, which is almost even more important than finding co-founders, is learning how to code. Like if you want to start a technology startup, you need to know how to code. Like you cannot outsource this. This is the core value add of what you're going to build is the technology. It's the code that's running your website. That's going to be what's going to make you your money, make you something that's worthwhile. And I've got lots of friends that used to work at McKinsey with me, or from other places that have gone on to try and start businesses, and they've been like, oh, I found some guys in India, or there's some like development house in London. I've given them some equity. They're going to build my website for me. Every single time ends in tears. It's just awful. Like you'll find yourself 6 months down the line. You still haven't got a product. You don't really know how it works. You want to make some minor tweak. It's going to take 2 weeks. It's just it can be really, really awful. And so, when I first started out, I couldn't code. I'd never coded before. And what I did was I spent 3 months just before even starting a business, after I'd left McKinsey, just learning how to code, like every day, just practicing, reading from books. And it's the best thing that I ever did. Like now, I'm not a good coder. I'm really terrible. Like anything that I build needs to be rebuilt probably 2 or 3 times before we can actually push it out to production. But I understand what's going on. It's not something that's like a black hole to me. I understand the component parts, how they kind of fit together. It helps you to be able to make decisions. It helps you to be able to hire the right guys that can build the great code, because you're probably not going to be the ones that do that if you're just learning now. And I think the thing to remember is that learning how to code, you look at this stuff here and it's like, that's scary, right? Like I remember when I first started, I was like, I don't have any idea what's going on here. It's just some like magic hocus pocus stuff. Like you need to be a whiz kid to do this. But it's not that scary when you actually first get started. And it's just about picking up that book, going to Code Academy, doing something like that, and just learning the very basics. And you'll quickly learn that actually coding is just like a kind of few building blocks on top of each other in a really logical fashion that builds up into these more complex systems. And so don't think it's sort of out of reach. It's definitely something that you guys can do, and I would highly recommend learning how to code, especially now when you're at university, right? You can do it in your spare time. So that's kind of about before right now what you guys can be doing. When you're actually getting started, when you're actually thinking, okay, right, I want to start a business, there's a couple of things there that I think I wish I'd known when I was first starting. So the first one, and this is basically about how do you get your bright idea, right? How do you know what to do? And I think this is a really great way of thinking about it. So many people go around and think, okay, how can I? What's a great business idea? I'm going to come up with some really great insight into what's a great business idea, and that's the worst way to start, to try and find a great idea. The best way is to build something for yourself, something where you've identified a problem that annoys just you. You don't need to be sure about whether it annoys anyone else. Just build something for yourself, because then at least you know that one person wants what you're building, right? And I'll give you an example of where we messed that up, right? So when I was still at McKinsey, I used to work there with Matt, and we thought, okay, we want to start a business. Let's come up with a business idea. Yeah, let's do that. So we'd meet up for beer or dinner or coffee or whatever, and we bounce around ideas, and we come up with all sorts of ideas. Ranging from we'll do some sort of quirky events company, or we'll build a marketplace for unsigned music artists, and they were all theoretically amazing ideas. Well, they probably weren't even that good, but they made sense in theory. You could figure out the business model, etc., etc. And when we actually first settled on what we were going to build, we were like, okay, yeah, there's this problem. It's group payments is really annoying, right? Yeah, it's really annoying. We'll fix that. I'd never had any real problems with collecting money for groups. I'd never even done that. I just kind of thought, oh, that sounds like a good business idea. And so, we started out down that road, and I think we did a lot of things right. We did a lot of things wrong, But what we found ourselves 6 months later, about 5 iterations into the product, trying to sell this thing that no one really wanted to use. And the reason no one wanted to use it was because it wasn't really a problem. Like, we just thought it was a problem, and theoretically it was a problem, but no one really cared. And so I remember actually, one of the lowest moments of when I've, in my 2 years starting GoCardless, was when we were out in Silicon Valley doing Y Combinator, and when you're at YC, there's this thing called demo day at the end of the 3 months, and it's all about demo day. You need to get your graph that looks like this huge hockey stick like this, so that when you're on demo day and you're introing your startup to 200 of the best investors in the world, you can say, okay, this is what we're about. We're growing like this. You want to invest in us? So everyone's trying to get this hockey stick, and ours was kind of like that. A little bit of growth, but not much. And we were like, wow, we're really in trouble here. So we were like, okay, why won't people use our product? I remember we spent 2 weeks waking up every day at 6 a.m., every single one of us, including the back-end developers, and calling the UK from San Francisco every day for 2 weeks at 6 a.m. And you call people up being like, oh, we've got this thing called Group A. It helps you, that you run like a football club or whatever it is, helps you to collect money from your members. Why don't you think about joining us? Blah, blah, blah. And every single time you get someone in the pub, someone just leaving work, so, and being like, what is this? No, I don't really want this. This isn't for me. And eventually we kind of got the picture. And luckily for us, we managed to build something that actually ended up starting to get some traction elsewhere. So we kind of pivoted a little bit, and we were able to salvage it. But don't try and build a business idea. Build something that's a problem for yourself, something that you really care about and that you can use. And then the second thing that I think is really important to bear in mind is you need to start small. So one of the most frequent things that I've seen people make mistakes with when they first start a business is they go, okay, I'm going to build my MVP, my first version of the product. And it'll be like a calendaring app where it syncs your calendars, and it also gives you restaurant recommendations, and it also acts as a social network, all in V1. And you're like, how long is that going to take you to build? Because that's at least 6 months to a year's work, let's be honest. And what you'll actually find is that you'll have to make so many things, so many assumptions, you'll make so many mistakes along the way that you won't. The only way you can learn about those things is by a customer telling you flat out, I don't understand this, or I don't want this, or I want it to work like that. And so you need to get it out into the customer's hands as quickly as possible. And so I think a good rule of thumb to bear in mind is what can you build in a month that has the kernel of value that you think that your startup's going to provide, and don't build anything more than that. Just get it out there and learn about what are the mistakes you've made, learn about what are the assumptions that you've made that are wrong, and let your customers tell you what it is that you should be building. So that's kind of just before you get started. And then when you're actually starting out, what are the things that you need to bear in mind? And there's 2 things there as well. I've kept it simple, 2 things in each. So the first one is focus. One of the things that people just really mess up, and I'll tell you about how we messed that up. We mess up everything, but it's focus. You get distracted because especially in the early days, so many things seem really important that you feel like you have to do all of them. And especially because when you first start, there's not really anything getting you up out of bed in the morning. You don't have customers, you don't have a product, you don't have anyone that you've got to account to. You don't have a boss, so you make up things to do. And it'll be like, okay, we need to go and find investors, or we need to do this or that. But really, there's only 2 things that you need to do when you first start, and that's build a product and talk to your customers, and that's it. That's the only 2 things. And an example of where we messed this up, and I'll point to Owen as an example. When we first started, we were like, so we were running a startup, and we've been going for I think this was before we even had a first product. No, but it was before that. When we actually interviewed you guys, it was before that. And we were like, yeah, we need like employees. Yeah, we need to find some people to work for us. So we were like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go and find some interns because we don't have any money. We're not going to pay them. What we'll do is we'll give them an experience over Easter. And this was like in January. And I remember coming up to Oxford and lining up like 30 interviews with a bunch of people, including Owen. And we were like, yeah, what we'll do is we'll get these interns in. And we hired 10 interns. 10. And then we got them to come up to Easter. We shipped you guys in the back of a van into like this flat that we found in like Streatham or something. Yeah. And like there was like 6 guys living in this 2-bedroom flat. And it was an awesome time. And we made some great product. We built loads of things. But at the end of the day, like we spent probably more time like getting you guys like up to speed and explaining what we were doing and like building these products, but we'd not even spoken to any customers. We were like, we built stuff and no one wanted it, and it was like, hands up, that was a mistake. I mean, it was great. I had a great time with Owen, but it was, that was not focused. You really want to just keep it really, really, really lean what you're doing, and then the last thing that I kind of want to leave you guys with is just don't die. Like, I remember that something that really, really stuck with me was when I was out in Silicon Valley, Sam Altman, who's one of the partners at Y Combinator, once said to us, okay, succeeding in a startup is like riding a wave between success and failure and just not bailing out for long enough. And that really, really stuck with me because like when you're starting a business, you always feel like you're on this cusp of just like everything falling apart, just constantly. You're like, it's always like, oh, if only we can just get like this round of investment, or if only we can get our first 1,000 customers, or if only we can get this, that, or the other, we'll be fine. But as soon as that happens, there's just another thing that's going to go and kill you. And you're just like, it's never ending. So it's really, really like hard to start a business, and it's really, really easy to give up. But the key is just not to give up, like, be tenacious. And I'll kind of point to another example of when we did this. Like when we were raising investment, we'd been at YC for like 3 months. We'd raised a little bit of investment there, but this was our chance to really get some money and actually pay ourselves a salary and employ some more people. And I remember we thought, okay, before we start, we were like, what we're going to do? We were in the valley, so like everything's crazy over there, and we were like, what we're going to do is we're going to raise like $1.5 million. Yeah, we'll do that. And so we went out and we spoke to like must have been hundreds of investors, and just at the start, you're like really, really, I don't know, almost wildly confident in yourself. You'll be like, yeah, this is going to be easy. We're just going to get it done in a week. And then the no's start coming through, and you're like, oh, that guy said he was interested, but no, now he's not. This isn't good. And then you're like, oh, but I banked on that guy, and he's out now. And then I remember like another one of my low points. I like sharing my low points. We were in a parking lot in Sand Hill Road, which is like the road in Silicon Valley where all the VCs are. And like we just come out of like another no, where it's just like clearly the guy wasn't interested. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, we've got like 150 grand like committed so far. And like we've told everyone we're going to raise 1.5 million. This is like embarrassing. This is just, I really just want to like sack this in. And then like luckily, because Matt was there with me, he was like, no, we can't do that. Like we cannot go back to the UK with less than $1 million. And we just like, we basically like lied, cheated and steal to like get that money. We would say like, oh, this guy's already in. They weren't in. And then like, you'd like do this and that and everything you could. And like, eventually we managed to just like land like one big guy. They put in 500 grand, and the next day another guy wanted to put like 500 grand in, and like all of a sudden we were like at 1.5, and we'd made it. But it would have been so easy to just been like, oh, actually, forget about this. I'll give back the 150 grand. Let's just call it a day. And there you would have been done. I mean, another example like Airbnb. Airbnb is like worth what, like 2 billion, 3 billion now. And those guys for 2 or 3 years before they even got onto YC, they were just like scrapping around like. Anyone that would have met them would have been like, you guys are a joke. This isn't going anywhere. And like those guys were just so tenacious, and that is what has like got them to where they are now. So just stick with it. It's hard, but you'll hopefully get there. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you guys today in terms of talk. I figured like we could just do some Q&A or something like that now. I don't know what you guys have got in mind, but if some people, I don't know, how do you want to do this?
Give Hiroki a round of applause. Take questions.
Yeah? Okay.
So I'm quite interested about YC and the sort of startups over there. At what level are they? Are they at idea level, or are they all kind of, we have something implemented? And
What, when they get on?
yeah.
So they range massively. So YC have got like a big, put a big emphasis on the founders rather than the business. And so, they accept people without even having ideas through to, some of the companies that were on my batch, for example, already had like tens of millions of people coming and using their site a month. And like, they were pretty established guys. So it really ranges, but what they really care about is, do they think that you guys as founders are going to be good at starting a company? Yeah.
You did consulting right after uni and then started your business. Do you think it was actually helpful to be a consultant, or could you just have skipped this part?
It's a good question. So I'm glad that I worked as a consultant for a couple of years. It helped me in a number of ways. Like one was it taught me a lot of soft skills. I mean, I studied maths at university, so it's not exactly the most well-rounded subject. And so it was really, really useful in that sense. It was also really useful because it showed you what how the world works. And up until working as a consultant, I thought like CEOs were like these mythical beings that could just do like all sorts of magical things. And then you go and see like an actual CEO like working there, and he doesn't have a clue what's going on, and he's making decisions based on like the analysis like you've come up with at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you're like, okay, maybe you ain't so hot. But so it kind of opened my eyes in that sense. So I'm glad I did it, but I don't think it's necessary. Like, I think you can start a business. You could start a business now. Like, lots of great entrepreneurs start even before they get to university. And so if you've got like a burning desire to start a business and you have something that you want to do and you think you're ready, like, I think it's more about, are you confident in yourself and in your own ability to start something rather than needing a particular skill set. Yep. So I learned how to code Rails, Ruby and Rails, basically. That was like, that's what I'd like been exposed to and seen other people using. I mean, I think that like the two main ones you can like learn and that are like widely like accepted as the kind of the de facto ones like Ruby and Python. If you go with either of those, you can't go wrong really. Go on. Okay.
I just wanted to ask, did you plan to be a consultant for 3 years and then do your own business? Or
Yeah.
Before you started?
So for me, I always knew that I wanted to start a business. Like I was in OE, I had the bug, right? And I saw a lot of people, like my peers, like starting businesses, but I just didn't feel ready when I was leaving uni. So I actually chose to go to McKinsey because they did a 2-year program. It was like a 2-year program, then you're out. So that was why I did that. I knew like if I got into a job that they didn't kick me out of, it would be like quite difficult to leave. And so I just figured like, okay, I'll get forced to make the decision again in 2 years.
Hi, thanks for the talk, by the way. So you're recommending us to never give up, which I totally agree with. However, how do you recognize an idea which is actually rubbish? Because then you actually have to give up and
Yeah.
focus on something else.
Well, I think your customers will tell you that, right? If you don't have any customers, then you're probably doing the wrong thing.
Okay, how many people?
But that's different from giving up, right? Changing what you're doing is not the same as giving up.
Right. How many people were using Airbnb in the first years?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Not that many, right? So, like, yeah, I mean, there's never any like hard and fast rules with this stuff, right? So, like, if you ask me, like, the Airbnb guys, like, I wouldn't have lasted that long. Like, those guys were just crazy. But like, they managed to make it work, and that's like an extreme example of how you can like tenacity can kind of see you through. But I think that you kind of need to go with your gut on that, right? You need to go with, like, there's a difference between like saying sacking it all in, I'm not going to start a business anymore, and like listening to your customers and tweaking the idea or changing the idea as you go along. But I think that's the customers will be the ones that tell you that.
What do you think of things like Rocket Internet?
I think they're an interesting like company, right? I think it's interesting because they're not very innovative in the way that they choose what to work on, but like they've created a really, really innovative model for starting a company. So I think that they're doing some really interesting things. Personally, I wouldn't work there. I've heard some like interesting things about the culture, but it's not for everyone. But some people thrive in that, and I think they're going to do really well. Go on.
Yeah. So when you talk about culture, like I know some people really love this idea of like creating a unique culture for the company. I think it's like total bullshit that you talk about that. Like, what's your position on that? And do you think you have like a specific culture at your company?
Interesting. So yeah, I think culture is super important, right? Because like at the end of the day, I work at GoCardless every day, right? I work on it in the evenings. I work on it on the weekend. Like, I'm working on it pretty hard, right? So like I want it to be somewhere that I want to work, and the best way to make it somewhere that you want to work is to have a great culture where you're working with people that you enjoy spending time with, and that you're all like engaged and enthused about what you're doing. And that's the only real way that you can do that is through building the culture of an organization. If you ask me like how you build that culture, I don't really know. Like I think that that's something that we're trying to figure out all the time, right? That especially as we grow, like now we're at 20 people. Like that's something that it's a little bit less organic when you need to kind of put in place the foundations of, but. We still haven't figured that out. There's some bits of our culture that are great, some bits that are bad. So, in terms of what's great about our culture is that we're very like technology focused. We've focused on hiring great engineers that want to build great products. And so from that perspective, we're really good. However, we're not as good at figuring out what to work on and how do we get the most out of the team in terms of productivity. And that's something that we're always trying to figure out, like how do you improve the office? How do you work on bigger projects and make sure that people are working towards the same goal? And those are things that you're constantly trying to figure those things out. Go on.
How did you work out how much money you wanted to raise, and how did you decide how to build your team from being like the three of you who started it to...
Yeah. So that's like two questions, I guess. So there's a very simple answer for how do you know how much to raise. You raise the most money that you can at the maximum valuation that you can, right? And so the two things that really matter are how much of the company you're giving away and how much money you're getting. And if you can give away less of the company and get more money, that's almost always a good thing from a founder perspective. So that's pretty simple. In terms of knowing who to hire, it's pretty obvious, to be honest. You'll get to a point where you're just we can't actually do this anymore because I'm spending all my time doing this, or I need someone that can do that, and you kind of hire on a needs basis, fairly reactive.
Sorry, you said that at the beginning you didn't think you were solving a problem in particular, and then you came upon the idea of GoCardless.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying that it's used a lot by SMEs.
Yeah.
Had you worked in SME before?
No.
Did you talk to SMEs? And
No, I mean it's a complete luck, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we fell into what we're doing, if we're going to be honest, right? What happened was we were working on this group payment problem, and we built this payment system for that. And then at the same time, we were hearing demand from these guys that we'd call up, and they'd say, "Oh, I'm not interested in using this for my football club, but can I use it for my small business?" And you were like, "Oh, well, I guess so. Yeah, why not?" And then it kind of went from there. So we got lucky in that sense. But that's kind of how it works, right? These ideas, it's very rare that an idea will start out in its fully formed, shape. Facebook didn't start out as the social network for the world, right? It started out as how can I rate the girls in my class. So these things evolve over time. Is anyone not asked a question? How about this guy?
Could you just explain a little bit more detail, really
Yeah.
group is was, like, what did you do? You quit your job. Did you have any money with the savings? And at what point, what was the funding? Was that YC or?
Yeah, no. So we, when we first started out, so I left McKinsey, went and worked as a freelance consultant for a few months to save up some money. So that's quite lucrative, and I was lucky with that. So I had like enough money to kind of like just feed myself for a few months, like 6-7 months, something like that. And then the three of us just kind of basically sat in my bedroom every day and built this product just from like, we built it on top of PayPal initially, and it was just like Tom and I just coding away every day to like figure out how to build that, and then like sent it to like all of our friends and said like use it, and then like went from there. And it's kind of just sort of like, okay, no one's using it. How can we get people to use it? Okay, this guy said he'd use it if we built this, right? Let's build that, and you kind of go from there. No. Go on.
So you and the two of the co-founders, do you have an individual function in the business?
So broadly speaking, like Tom takes care of the back end side of things. I take care of the front end and like design aspects of the business, and then Matt takes care of the more salesy and marketing side of stuff. But to be honest, like that's a fairly broad split, and like you kind of, as a founder, you end up doing a bit of everything, right? So you'll go and meet with investors, you'll like figure out the legals, you'll deal with regulation, like all sorts of random stuff that comes up on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Can you talk about a bit about the importance of Hacker News being on it or being active on it in terms of getting a place on Y Combinator? Does it?
No, I don't think it makes a difference at all. Yeah, like I mean, I'd never used Hacker News. I used to read Hacker News a little bit, but like, I'd never used Hacker News before getting onto YC. It's the best place to hire though. Like in terms of recruiting, that's almost one of the most valuable things about Y Combinator is that only YC companies are allowed. So Hacker News is this like kind of forum for geeks basically, and it's the only people that can post jobs on Hacker News are ex-YC companies. So and it's like by far and away the best place to hire. Any other questions? Go on.
So you found these co-founders. When you were starting the company, how did you decide about the equity split between the three?
Oh, I'm like 100% on this. Like it should always be equally split. Like any instance where it's not equally split, like is an indication that something's not right with the founding team, right? Like saying that like I value you twice as much as I value you, like there's something like innately wrong with that in terms of like the people that you're starting a business with, right? So that I'm strongly of the belief that you should have equal splits.
Very interesting. I agree to some extent with this point, but I heard of one of very senior venture capitalists here who came to give a talk.
Mm-hmm.
He said that if a company, if like all the co-founders have exactly equal split, then it's a problem in the sense that if there is a conflict,
yeah.
Nobody kind of taking the decision or the lead.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, but I think that optimizing for like when you're going to mess up is kind of the wrong way of thinking about it as a founder. This is why it's important to start with guys that you really like trust and know well. But if you're kind of like structuring it in a way that's like in case things go tits up, like this guy can make the decision. That's kind of not a great place to start, right?
What route would you have taken if Y Combinator didn't exist?
I don't know. Like we would have just kept on hustling ourselves, right? We would have figured out what to do. I think that as a founder, you're always like trying to find like the next thing that's gonna like leapfrog your business or get like help it gain momentum. And so for me at least, like YC was something that I had experience with in the past, like in terms of I'd interned at a YC company before, and I knew the value of it, and I could see like how it would like help our business. So it was like it was a natural thing to do. But if that hadn't have existed, we would have just done whatever else we would have thought would have helped the business the most at the time. It's hard to say. It's kind of hypothetical.
So you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
What beyond the money they give into your business, like how much impact does that have?
Yeah, well, it depends on the investor really. So like YC, for example, it's a lot less about the money and it's more about the experience of doing that program and the brand and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas someone like Axel, who are the VC company that are in like that have invested in us, those guys provide a lot of like great advice. They help us figuring out, you know, which direction to go in. They're more like partners, right? And like you have like more of a working relationship with them. So it kind of depends on the investors. But in general, it's good to have investors that are fairly hands-off, like especially at the early days. So like we've been lucky enough to have fairly hands-off investors that we ask them for advice or help with something as opposed to them like coming and bugging us. Yep.
So what sort of advantages did being an Oxford alumnus confer you? And why did you go to Y Combinator and you didn't use the sort of Oxford fund?
So, sorry, I didn't understand the second part of the question.
So you went for funding, you went to Y Combinator, right?
Yeah.
So why did you just use one of the Oxford funds? Why did you travel over the ocean?
Okay, so the in terms of how did Oxford help? I mean, that's a hard question. It's kind of touched on many aspects of my life, right? I was at Oxford and like I was part of Oxford Entrepreneurs, so like I learned a lot about the world of entrepreneurship through OE and through the contacts I made there. So I'd say it's probably like the network and the role models that I gained from being here that was probably the most helpful. And then in terms of like why we went for YC, like I'd seen like I knew Corvair and Harj, who were both OE alumni who were like in the years above me, and they'd gone and done Y Combinator. I'd gone and interned with those guys, so I'd seen firsthand what Y Combinator could do for a business, and you know it was a kind of a no-brainer to go and apply to something like that. I not really thought about the Oxford ones, to be honest with you. Yeah, go on.
Is there anything apart from code that you wish you'd known kind of before starting business?
Wow, lots of things. It's hard to pinpoint like any one specific thing. Like I think that like just the thing to bear in mind is that like it's good. It's important to just be willing to make lots of mistakes. So like it's better to like go and do lots of things and make lots of mistakes along the way than to try and like figure out the perfect way of doing things. And you'll find that it's very rare that you'll get it right first time round. But the value in like making the mistake and learning from it is greater than like trying to get it right the first time.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Yeah, go on.
Thanks for the talk. It's brilliant. From a YC perspective, again, I know you've mentioned quite a few, but what are the top few features which makes it stand out? What would you improve if there is anything, the YC model?
So, I mean, the things that like really helped with YC were one, like the experience of going there and like being part of a program and getting mentorship from some of the greatest minds in like technology startups, right? Then the brand is also very helpful, especially with investors. And finally, like the network that it affords you, like both in terms of the guys that you meet on the program, and then also in terms of like the ability to reach out through like things like Hacker News to recruit and things. I mean, even now, like that's probably like almost one of the most longest standing benefits is being able to post your jobs on Hacker News and get applicants through that. So those are the 3 things I'd say. In terms of like how you'd improve it, it's morphing all of the time. Like those YC themselves see themselves as a startup, so they're constantly evolving it, and I think they're doing a pretty good job. Like they maybe grew a little bit too quickly, and so like they're trying to figure out the issues around that. But other than that, it's hard to say. Yeah, go on.
You mentioned that you went for the Y Combinator, but have you like started your company here in UK? Or
Yeah.
So why did you do that, and how do you compare the London startup scene compared to?
So I mean, we did YC because we just wanted to go where we thought we'd get the best advice and the the best help. And the YC was, in my opinion, like by far and away the best place to do that. In terms of how London compares to Silicon Valley, I think it's like London's a lot younger in terms of a startup scene. I mean, it's still in its infancy in a way, right? But it's growing really, really quickly. So if I compare it to even like 3 years ago, it's completely different. And then if I compare it to when I was at OE and seeing like what was going on in London, like back in 2005, 2006, like it's almost unrecognizable. There was like no startup scene in London back then. So it's growing a lot and it's getting better, but it's still got a long way to go to compare to somewhere like Silicon Valley. Yeah. Cool.
I think that's all our time. So
thanks, guys.
Thank Hiroki again.
Cheers.